Writing advice is actually crazy, and let's talk about it. So I started this channel years ago, almost 10 years ago, because I was a young writer who was really interested in not only filmmaking, but also writing. And so YouTube and making writing videos was kind of the perfect pairing. And I spent a lot of sort of my earlier years, pretty much every year up until around 2023, consistently making craft videos, sharing my writing advice, things I learned, things I thought that would be helpful for people to learn. And that was kind of my shtick. I did other content, but really the writing advice was one of the major stakes of my channel, alongside, your typical authortube writing vlogs, writing challenges, things like that. That's sort of like the trifecta of authortube: writing advice, writing vlogs, and writing challenges. Starting in 2022, I believe this summer, I had gone on a bit of an adventure trying to get more serious about YouTube, as in, trying to optimize my posting strategy, increase engagement, increase viewership, increase ad revenue, everything like that. So that summer, I think I was posting like 2 videos a week. It was like pretty intensive, and the content was like quite like commercial, like think your run-of-the-mill how to write blah 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 kind of a video. And it taught me a lot about YouTube and video making in general and being on social media. I kind of fell off a bit, and really since that point I haven't consistently made writing advice videos. And that's not to say that I haven't wanted to, or that I haven't interrogated writing advice, that I haven't thought about writing craft in the last 3 years, because I have. But I can't get away from the fact that writing advice videos in general are difficult for me to make, for the specific reason that they just feel so contradictory to absolutely everything that I believe in. Now, to get this part out of the way, my videos, when I'm doing like sit down talking videos like this, they're like usually high masking videos. Like I can't stop that. Like when I turn on the camera, I'm very attuned to the personality that I've created on camera, and I kind of stick to it even in a video like this where I'm just trying to be casual and have a conversation. It's kind of impossible, just for the sake of autism. Like I can't turn that off. If I want to, it's very difficult in terms of filming something. So let's just get that out of the way. Now, what inspired me to actually finally figure out what I wanted to say and film it was a few weeks ago. I had a conversation with one of my friends, and today I was in a class that Garth Greenwell is teaching. Garth Greenwell is like my favorite writer of all time, and I enrolled in his online class that he's teaching this year. And this is sort of something that he mentioned just about his sort of perspective on writing advice and writing craft and stuff like that. In that conversation, what I wanted to say sort of clarified, and all of it is going to be completely contradictory. It's not going to make any sense, but I think that a lot of people are going to understand exactly what I'm saying, especially if you have been in the online writing advice, kind of writing craft space for as long as I have been. I have split this video into a few topics. The first one is that I have many contradictions within me, and I will get to the fact that this video is literally set up like a writing advice video, like the structure at the end of the video, because I couldn't get away from that either. But I have just a major contradiction when it comes to writing advice that sort of exists within me, that has existed within me for years. I mean, if you check out the descriptions of my videos for like the last 3 years, it says like there's a disclaimer for my writing advice videos. I say it all the time in my writing advice videos. It's just been something that has been brewing for a long time. I don't necessarily believe in writing advice, but I also believe that not believing in writing advice can kind of be an elitist position to take. And you've got to bear with me, because those thoughts are very black and white. Unfortunately, in communicating, that's just sort of how it works. Like something I say is sort of the position I take, but it's not necessarily as black and white as that. But basically, I have my notes on the side. I'm pretty much going to just continue to refer off of them so that I don't ramble too much. But I started watching authortube like from its conception, like since there were like 2 people making videos on writing on YouTube. And I know it's changed a lot in the last few years. It's expanded a lot, which is really, really great. Impulse with watching authortube was that writing was really interesting to me. And, YouTube is the place where I would go to, engage in things that was interesting to me, whether that was like makeup tutorials or cheese making videos. Those are the videos I used to watch when I was like 9. Writing became one of those other topics. So of course, authortube is where I would find those videos because that's sort of just the community that we call people who make videos about writing. And what was nice is that it sort of connected me in the social media world to something that I was doing in the real world. I didn't necessarily see it as like, oh, I'm gonna go to YouTube to learn how to write a book. It was just more like, oh, well, I'm always talking about writing and now I can sort of engage with it in a social media format. Now, I say all that to emphasize that I don't think that knowledge should be gatekept. As somebody who went through all of academia, the thing that pissed me off, I could make an entire video, 5 things that pissed me off about academia. But one of the major things that I did not like about academia, and one of the reasons why I won't return to academia most likely, there's this sort of, there's an exclusivity to academia. I mean, that was the whole point. People probably know a lot more about academia's history and classism and racism, and I don't know a lot about that, but there always was sort of like this divide. When I was in class, I'd be like, why are people talking like they're not even human? Like, you could just, talk about this in a completely different way that's a lot more accessible, or, oh, this knowledge you only uncovered because you're in university. That really bothered me. And so one of my major goals with this channel is just to take away that barrier, to make knowledge accessible, to make knowledge free, to make sure that people who are interested in learning more about writing, who are interested in writing, have a resource that they can click on, and they don't have to worry about having to pay for it, having to budget for it, something like that. So I believe that knowledge should be shared, but also like who determines what knowledge is and what knowledge is actually correct. So it's getting theoretical, and I think in a sense the theoretical nature of this dilemma that I have is also kind of like an elitist take in a sense, because like it's not that deep, but it feels that deep sometimes. So that is really the main contradiction, the reason I have not really been making writing advice videos, because I couldn't really contend with that. Like, I don't like these videos where we talk about 5 things to do, blah, 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 blah. But also I like that people find them helpful, and that people are writing and interested in writing because of them. So, dichotomies, we're gonna have to deal with them this entire video. My next section of this video is the unfulfillable promise of craft. Yeah, very, very high-tea way to phrase that. But in the class, Garth gave a really, really interesting definition of how he views writing craft and sort of like this whole idea of writing craft. Now, I don't want to put words in his mouth, so I'm just going to sort of say what I perceived what he was saying as. But, I'm sure he has a lot of information on this himself from his own words. How I perceived it is that he said, writing craft is tools that are invented for a particular problem in a particular project by a particular writer at a particular time. And I thought that was so good. Right as he said that, I was like, wait, I think I know how to make this video that I've been trying to make for like 2 years on why writing craft is such like a contentious topic for me in my own head as a writer. And he also said this phrase that checklists are a lie. And I thought that was so interesting, as in, like the 5 tips to do this, 10 tips to write romance, 12 tips to get over writer's block, stuff like that. Those checklists where you go through videos that I've made, right? Those checklists where you go through, 12 things a person wants to talk about. That's the advice. That's how you fix the problem. And I guess his positioning on it is that even if those lists sort of are useful, and I loved how he phrased this, pedagogically useful in a space of a class, right? And I think a lot of people, like in my comments or myself, have experienced this thing where in the video, you're like, whoa, this is so helpful. Like even in a class, like just by virtue of being in a class, like I have taught classes. I was in a class. The advice you're getting, the things you're learning in the class, they are useful within the realm of the class. But in reality, when it's kind of boots on the ground, when you have to do something with it, those videos, like those checklists, those blog posts, they're not necessarily helpful. Like you're not going to be thinking of, maybe I'm wrong. Let me know. Are you thinking of what Rachel Wright said at like minute 7:43 in a craft video? Like, because, it's not that simple when it comes to actually putting the advice into use, even though a lot of these highly commercialized writing advice videos really do make it seem like it's that simple. Like, do this and you'll get this. And I'm sure I have probably videos like that too. So I thought that was interesting. And it also sort of sparked the other side, the dilemma that is that sort of pedagogical usefulness, which just sounds, it's a very, very dense phrase, still helpful though to the writer in a different way. Like maybe not practically when you're drafting, but in maybe building your confidence, making you feel like, okay, I feel like I really want to write this, opening yourself up to trying new things. I've gotten that feedback a lot as both a creator and a consumer of this sort of content. I see both sides because I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, if I'm in a class, for example, today with one of my favorite writers, I come out the other end feeling better. Will I necessarily apply absolutely everything? I don't know. I'm not even sure if I'm going to remember it. Like maybe on like a subconscious level, I took notes, I can refer to those, but is it just as helpful, the fact that I feel confident sort of coming out of it, talking to writers, like listening to writers, hearing people talk about something that I'm passionate about? So is that also still useful, even though like the idea of 5 tips on how to write dystopian fiction might only be like pedagogically useful to some people? Maybe some people find it really helpful. So there's absolutely no defining what is right and what is wrong, which we're going to get to. There's no binaries. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the sympathetic reader. And this is something that Garth also mentioned in the class. So, just giving credit where credit is due. But basically where he had spoken about how there really are no rules, and I agree with that. I've always agreed with that. Even before I went to get my degree, I agreed that there was no rules in writing. And how I've sort of revised what he said for the sake of this video is that some people will think that there are rules. Like you can't get away from that. There will be critics who think that, people on YouTube who think that, your mom thinks that. So some people will think there are rules and that your writing is this, this, and this. Like it's bad, it doesn't follow that rule, or it does that rule really well. But you're not writing for those people who are thinking about the rules of writing. You're writing for the people who kind of see what you have been trying to put out there. So what he said was that only you, and then a circle of trusted readers who are sympathetic of and understanding of your cause, what you are trying to do, can point out places, where the work may need quote unquote improvement. Now, he didn't really exactly say it that way. Again, these are my interpretations. I'm not trying to say, oh, because this writer who I like said this, like this is exactly what I think now, because that seems completely counterintuitive to the video. But I will say that it's listening to other people talk about this particular thing that makes it make more sense to me. I think my friend Shaylin made a similar video years ago, maybe like 6 years ago, which I'll link, talking about a similar thing when it comes to this dilemma with writing advice, writing craft, and the writing community online. My next bit is that there are no answers. And I have always agreed with this. This came up in the class, but it's also something that I've had, extensive conversations with online, like to my commenters, like with my sister, who's also a writer, and we have a podcast. I'm sure we'll make a podcast episode about that at some point. What I loved is that, he really solidified, and something that I always believe is that in writing, there really are no answers. So you can ask a question, but it doesn't mean that there's going to be an actual answer, like, because it's an art, right? It's not math, and I'm sure there's some reason why someone would tell me that there's a math problem that also does not have an exact answer. So this is why, I'm always wary of sort of the marketing of like, this is the only way to do something in writing, or the marketing of content. Like there's science here, and these are the facts of how to write something perfectly. I'm always wary of that because I'm like, no, but when you break it down, it's really just a marketing tool. So, but I think it's really permeated the way that we interact with art online, which I think is so interesting because it brings art and art making to the masses, but then it also is like very binary, which anyways, we'll get to that. So Garth had said this thing, I'm just quoting him the whole time, that writing and revising are really hard, and the agony of it is that no one can answer specific questions for you. And I've reiterated that to many people in my comments, and sometimes I have this guilt as a content creator where people will ask me like, I want to do this in my story, is that right? And I'll feel guilt, like, did I make this person feel like there is only one right way to write a story? And I think that's sort of an intrinsic, like inherent guilt that I will always carry as a content creator that makes videos on art, because I don't ever want people to think that there's a right and wrong way, and that if you don't do it the way Rachel says, it's wrong. But I also don't want to not share my thoughts because then I feel like the people who are interested then are robbed of that. Not that I think that I have very interesting things to say, but I don't want to like, delete my own thoughts just for the sake of, avoiding people thinking I'm completely right. But I do hold that guilt still. And when I see comments like, oh, but I did this in my story and that's not what you said in the video. And then I'm like, oh shit, I did not mean to make them think. Like, I don't know what happened like for me in my communication to make people think that. And I mean, I know I'll get to it. It's sort of, I think, part of being on YouTube that you can't really get away from. And then something else that I liked that he said in the class was that there are questions that you can't answer either. And this is something that I have a lot of personal experience with as I've written many, many different projects, because the answer that you found for this project, like one project, is not going to be the same answer for a different project, or maybe it'll be the same answer but applied in a completely different way. So you're always answering different questions every single time you start a new project. And this is why I always say, like, whenever I start a new book, I have no idea what I'm doing, even though I've written like a bajillion. I think I just finished my 13th like full-length book, and it doesn't matter because I don't know everything. By the time I'm jumping into my next novel and I feel like a brand new writer, and I just realized it's just part of the process. Like those questions I will never be able to answer, but I think it's hard when you're positioning that in writing advice. Like, how am I supposed to tell somebody that, they're asking me this question? Like, how am I supposed to tell them that I can't answer that question for them? Because this is a video on writing advice. How can you accept as an artist like that really abstract, like kind of like ridiculous understanding that there are questions that you can't answer? How am I going to approach craft videos in the future? Because I think I have some really interesting ones sort of in the works that have either been, bloomed from that time when I was really into craft videos, or that have sort of just come to me after that point, but I didn't know how to go about making. And the short answer is I don't know. Like, I have no idea how I'm gonna make them. Like, really the most intuitive and easiest to edit kind of video is one where I set the camera in front of me, I have a mic, I have lights, and I have a script, and then I just film it, and then I edit it, and I upload it. That is the most simple format for me. It's the most accessible format for me. It's the quickest format for me now that I'm working and I have other responsibilities. Maybe they'll just look like that, but I have no idea. But the point is, I'm not going to make sort of promises on what it's going to look like, if it's even going to look like anything, if I'm even going to make these craft videos again. I don't know. So the part that I mentioned earlier I wanted to talk about is that, like, even in prepping this script, I have headings, like I have a script. First of all, I have a script. I have headings, like, how am I going to approach craft videos in the future? And what I have really realized is that it's an unavoidable part of communicating about writing in a way that makes sense to other people, right? So it would be one thing for me to like write out my notes like furiously and then just like sort of put them out into the universe just in my mind. Like, I can't do that. I have to sit in front of a camera and I have to talk it out. And a lot of the times it only makes sense to make a video if I can structure it. Because then if I don't, I'll sit in front of a camera for 46 hours and still not know really what I'm talking about. So part of it is that the medium doesn't allow for the kind of conversation that I want to have, and then it might be impossible, right? Like, I don't know. So really, I want to continue to make more videos, especially in the craft sense, that are sort of in this pseudo discussion. I think somebody had said in class that they liked sort of the feel of the class because it was like a radio call-in show. And I loved that comparison because I do think that that's where I learn the most about writing. If I'm going to, besides actually writing is where I learn the most about writing. But like the second, probably maybe the third after reading is that, and maybe after critique, is I love hearing other people talk about writing. And I think it's interesting in hearing other people's theories, which is why a lot of the times I like to think of writing craft, writing advice as writing theory, because it's other people's theories. It's just their thoughts. It's not a fact. It's just a thought. And so I thought that was an interesting way to think about how I might approach videos in the future. And like I said, some of them might be this sort of highly saturated, highly commercial videos. Some of them might not be. I might not want to make those. And a lot of it, again, is down to masking. Like, it's hard for me to make a scripted video that is natural, because it's hard to get my, theory out from my head to a video without completely scripting it and talking to the camera like this, you know? So I don't know how much of it is avoidable, and I'm not gonna force myself to like unmask, but really that unmasking is just masking to look like unmasking. I'm not the Russian nesting doll of masking. My next bit is about elitism and the confines of social media. I studied writing, like, the way I said that with like such a disgusted face sort of nauseates me to think, but yes, I studied creative writing academically for 4 years. So elitism, I mean, I've seen it all. In every corner that you could probably think of. Okay, actually, there's probably a lot more that I haven't seen. I won't say that about myself. I think that in itself is kind of like hoity-toity. This really calls back to my personal contradictions that I mentioned before, that I think knowledge should be accessible, but that also like what knowledge is right and who decides like that knowledge is the knowledge that should be shared, right? Now, I wanted to tell a bit of a story about my most popular video, which if you have been a longtime subscriber, maybe you don't know about, but a lot of people probably watching this video maybe came from that video. I don't know. It's how to write a short story in 4 easy steps, I think is what it's called. And it's a video that I quite literally made as an experiment in editing and in delivery and in how I presented that content to see how the video would perform. Now, for the first entire year of that video's life, it kind of performed like a regular Rachel Writes video, maybe a higher tier Rachel Writes video. Like it hit like 2,000 views or something in a year, and that was really good for me. And then like a year later, it ended up hitting the algorithm, and now it has over 200,000 views, which is really, really a lot for me. Like that seems absolutely crazy. And so I've seen what it can look like when that content goes commercial. So I did it on purpose in that video. I made it commercial. The clicks and the swishes and the lighting and the delivery and everything was made, and thumbnail even was made to sort of mimic that typical, 2017 YouTube style, and it worked, right? But that has given me a lot of insight into authortube in general. So I have seen how this sort of highly commercial or do this with the promise of getting that kind of video works and how well it does on social media. Like I said, that video went viral to my standards, okay? And first of all, mostly I am very grateful because I have seen how many young people, especially teenagers, have been inspired to start writing short stories because of that video, or maybe hopefully in the future may revisit writing. Something cool that you guys wouldn't know is that video seems to have been circulated among teachers, like in classrooms, because I can see that on the back end, like where are people viewing this? And a lot of it is on Google Classroom. And so that's so interesting to me that, Gen Z or like Gen Alpha are being shown this video. And to some of them, they don't give a shit. It's just like sort of something that they're learning. And then some of them, like I think I've gotten some comments saying, oh, like I read a short story for class and this really helped me. Thank you. Like I really enjoyed it. And I think that is so amazing. Like if my work touched anybody, that's great. I don't usually try to think like when I'm going into a video, I hope this changes someone's life. I definitely sometimes still do that with some things, but not for this video. So I think that's just very humbling to me. And I mean, I've gotten even comments, I think from adults. I think someone in their 60s commented on that video saying, thank you so much. Like I've been wanting to write for a long time and this like really helped me, something like that. Anyways, very, very wonderful feedback to get. So I don't want to negate how impactful those commercialized videos are, because I can see it, right? So like, who am I then to say that format of the video, that highly commercial, you can think of like at least 5 authortubers who fit under that highly commercial standard. Who am I to say that that kind of content isn't valuable to people, right? Just because it goes against my moral positioning. Like, do I love that kind of video? 5 tips to do this? No. Do I absolutely hate the videos that are like the worst mistakes, blah, 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 make? Have I made videos in a vein like that? Yeah, like I do hate that kind of content. I don't like it myself. Have I seen people say, yeah, this was really helpful in the comments? Yeah, so like, am I the ultimate decider of what is healthy for writers to engage in or not engage in? No, right? On the other hand, I think that these kind of videos duly, because just by nature of how they are created and just their medium in itself, they sometimes give the impression, at least from sort of the feedback that I've received from people or the comments that I've read, that there's a black and white right or wrong way to do things in writing craft, right? And it's hard not to do that. I mean, when you're making a video, even videos of mine that I think are a little more, like I don't know how to say this, like more interesting, like not basic, more like advanced, like kind of, like my subtext video, for example. You have to say something like, tip 1, do this. And you stand by that positioning for the entire video. So then someone in the comments, so then naturally the other side of that is that you said this is the way you should do something. The other side is that there's a way that you shouldn't do it. But I don't agree with that. It's just by virtue of the format of the video, like that's how it's set up. Like maybe I didn't think of the other point that could, the counterpoint to what I said in the video. There are many things that I don't think of when I go into YouTube videos. Many people will comment on how like I fucked something up, like in my psychic distance video. Gold star to everyone who yells at me in that video. But this idea of like right and wrong is pervasive in writing advice. Like I don't think you can get away from it. And does that mean that we shouldn't have writing advice at all? I don't think so, because I feel like some people still really benefit from that. I'd love to hear what you think as like my viewers. If you're an authortuber too, I'd love to hear your thoughts, but particularly just from a viewer end, like I'm so curious what you think. But anyway, my advice that I've given in past videos, even in this video, is never intended to be a binary, right? Like, so, like I said, people will comment and be like, am I doing this right? Somebody had asked, like, basically my character doesn't change at the end of the story. Is that right? And I was like, I don't know. Like, you have to answer that question for yourself. But the confines of the medium being YouTube, like, creates the binary. I think I've illustrated that many times in this video. It's really hard. I can't think of any other way where that binary wouldn't exist. When I'm writing something down as, this is my advice for this topic, there's always another half that isn't explored, right? So there's always going to be this sort of binary, that feeling, at least, even if you as a viewer know that it's not binary, right? And speaking of that binary, the binary of like thinking of good versus bad writing, like strong versus weak writing, it's not very interesting to me anymore, at least not in that position. Like, I think I probably made videos of like, craft basics. I know I have a video on craft basics, like all new writers should know. Like, I don't really care like to make videos like that anymore. It's just because it's not interesting to me personally. That doesn't mean that it's not helpful to other people, right? I just like to think of writing now like as how something functions in the writing and what the function means to me. Maybe I don't like the function, maybe I do like the function. I just like to figure out the function. It's not whether or not it's good or bad in my head. Anyways, ultimately I want to create craft videos that move away from that binary as much as possible. And the reason I'm making this video before I even try to think about making more craft videos in the future is because I just felt like I needed a backdrop on what a craft video is to me and why I sort of have this moral dilemma about it. But I do acknowledge it's really difficult to create YouTube videos without a binary. Like it doesn't really work in the medium. And again, speaking of elitism, like I don't want to take the position necessarily, even though I don't disagree that, tip videos are useless or unhelpful, right? And it's not because I don't agree with it. It's more like it feels like fighting fire with fire and it's never going to end. Like that sort of conflict between those two things. Not that I think like you're an elitist if you think that, writing craft videos are not helpful. Like I don't think that at all. I also am aware of that kind of contradiction, the hypocrisy between, saying that and then also saying that I want people to have access to knowledge, right? Because, I think social media was really helpful to my writing journey, right? I know for a lot of people it's not helpful, but for me, I didn't know any other writers in my life when I was a kid besides my sister, which was a big help, but I think it was nice to know that there was a community outside of me, and I wouldn't want to take that away from people, I also acknowledge that this sort of like 5 tips to do XYZ many videos that I've made, they're just kind of like, oh, I watched it, now I probably never will ever revisit that ever again. Maybe other people feel differently, I don't know. But ultimately, my goal is to create an accessible writing education for the people who are interested in hearing me talk. I don't know what that's gonna look like. I would love to develop more like course-like videos. Not that I think courses are, exempt from all of these issues, but I think it might give me a little more time to sort of dig my claws into things because it's hard to not be black and white in a 10-minute video. You know what I'm saying? So anyways, that is the video. I think I talked so much and this video is much longer than I intended it to be, but that's sort of where my headspace is at in terms of writing advice, being kind of absurd, you know? Like, as an idea, it is weird. Like, I remember my professor had uploaded a copy of Matthew Salis's book. I can't remember the name of it. Craft in the Real World, I think, by Matthew Salisis, or I'm very sorry if I'm saying his name, Celestes, I don't know. And I remember when I was in second year, I was 19 years old. That's when I was making a lot of craft videos too. I was like really annoyed by that book. I didn't read the full thing, to be fair. I only read excerpts, but I was like, yeah, there is like a right way to do things. Like, you need to learn the foundation of writing. If not, you're gonna write terribly. And I thought that for a long time, even before that, when I was like, no, there is no right way to do it. And then I flipped to, yeah, there is a right way and you need to learn the basics. And now I'm kind of in the position of like, yeah, no, I think he had a point there, you know? Like, I haven't read the full book, but I know a lot of people really like it, especially in terms of dismantling this Western idea of stories and what we in the Western world think of as good versus bad, and how that sort of is pervasive in writing education at like the academic level, especially. Anyways, it's interesting how my thoughts change. Maybe I will hate this video in a few years. I don't know. I doubt it, because basically it's just me saying I don't know what I'm doing. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts again on the viewer side. And then if you actually genuinely like those kinds of like 10 tips videos, what is appealing about them? I would assume that they're, for somebody who might be like super stressed out and busy in their life, they're a lot easier to sort of digest, right? If you have kids to take care of, you've got a full-time job, maybe putting on one of those videos is the way that you engage with writing and learn how you can enjoy your writing even more. So I can't even judge that either. So take literally everything I've said as like completely flexible. Like, I have a very open brain when it comes to this now, but these are sort of where my thoughts are. So we'll chat in the comments, and I'll see you guys hopefully in a writing advice video. All right, bye.